Good evening and welcome. I'm Jody Hurwitz Kaplan, Chair of the JCRC, the Government Affairs and Public Policy Division of the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West. Together with the Jewish Federations of Northern New Jersey, South Jersey, Heart of New Jersey, and West Central New Jersey, we are proud sponsors of tonight's Senate Candidates Forum. As Jewish communal leaders, we believe in the importance of civic engagement and hearing from candidates for public office on issues of concern to our community. In light of the Iranian attack on Israel earlier today, with family members and friends huddled in bomb shelters, the issues are deeply personal. They are existential. And with anti-Semitism surging in our state and on our college campuses, we are looking to our government leaders for answers. Congressman Kim, the Jewish community of New Jersey is the fourth largest in the country, numbering over 600,000 residents. We are a diverse people in terms of our political views and Jewish affiliation, yet we are all inspired by the same Jewish values. We care deeply about Israel, the defensive war it's fighting against terrorist groups committed to its destruction, the fate of our hostages, the rise of anti-Semitism, and the Jewish imperative to care for the communities most vulnerable. To our viewers, please note that due to the limited time we have with each candidate, we've asked them to deliver a short opening statement and to keep their answers to each question to 2 minutes. Members of the audience are invited to put questions into the chat, and we'll get to them at the bottom of the hour. I'd now like to introduce David Spector, JCRC Chair of Southern New Jersey, who will introduce Congressman Kim.
Thank you so much, Jody. It's my pleasure to introduce our Congressman Andy Kim, who has represented New Jersey's 3rd Congressional District since 2019. The Congressman sits on the House Armed Services Committee and Foreign Relations Committee. He has served as a public servant under both Democrats and Republicans, working at the Pentagon, the State Department, the White House National Security Council, and in Afghanistan. Congressman, thank you for being with us. The floor is now yours for opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, everybody, for having me. I'm Congressman Andy Kim, and I want to just start by saying I know that tomorrow is Rosh Hashanah, so I wish you and your families a happy New Year, Shana Tova. And I just want to say, as I'm getting to know many of you, some I've met before and gotten to know, especially down in South Jersey where I live, but others we're getting to meet for the first time. So I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. I'm the son of Korean immigrants. My parents immigrated from South Korea to the United States 50 years ago. I grew up in South Jersey, in Marlton and Cherry Hill. I remember going to so many different bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs when I was growing up. I remember asking my parents, when was my bar mitzvah? And, it was just such a great experience growing up in such a beautiful, diverse, vibrant community. And it's one that really is at the essence of what we want here in New Jersey. But we've seen, the challenges that come with that diversity and the difficulties, especially facing the Jewish American community. When I was sworn into Congress representing Burlington and Ocean counties at the time, I remember one of the very first things that I had to address was a Facebook site that was spreading anti-Semitic rhetoric and hate across Ocean County, targeting the Jewish community there. And it was something that I spoke out against and made sure that we were working together across our entirety of our community in an interfaith, intergovernmental way to be able to step up. And since then, we've only seen the rise of anti-Semitism reach even scarier and terrifying points where I hear so many people say they've never seen it this bad during their lifetimes. And it's something that we absolutely have to address, which is why I feel committed to making sure that we pass the most comprehensive piece of legislation ever written to be able to counter anti-Semitism, which is the Countering Anti-Semitism Act. And I'm working to try to address it. It is a bicameral, bipartisan legislation that I hope that we can be able to pass by the end of this year, and something that tries to meet the moment and be able to get in as quickly as possible. And it's not lost on me that while we are having this conversation, that Israeli families are hunkered down, worried about what's about to happen. about what we've seen over the last nearly 12 months. So as we approach just 1 week out from the solemn anniversary of October 7th, still without so many of the hostages back to the families and their loved ones. This is a difficult moment, and it's one that really compels on us to think about how we can make sure that we're addressing this to the best of our ability, making sure that we absolutely recognize Israel's right to defend itself, that we recognize that Israel is going up against these terror groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, or just what we saw with these missile attacks from Iran. These are terror organizations that do not accept Israel's right to exist, just at a fundamental level. And as mentioned, this is an existential threat at so many points. And that's something that I recognize in a very deep and fundamental way. I worked before Congress in national security. I stepped up after the September 11th attacks to commit myself to keeping our country and keeping our way of life safe. I joined up at the State Department. I worked as a civilian advisor out in Afghanistan at the height of the war 13 years ago. I spent a number of years working on counterterrorism, in particular on countering Iranian violence throughout the Middle East, in particular focused on stopping their Shia or their Iranian-backed Shia militia groups, including Hezbollah, including going after the Quds Force and then Qasem Soleimani, who was spreading so much hate, so much violence and terror around the Middle East. So this is something that I've been working on well before my time in Congress, and I will continue to bring that expertise and experience to bear. That is why I worked so hard in my time in Congress to ensure that Israel has the capacity to be able to defend itself. I help lead the Iron Dome funding every single year through the appropriations process. And Israel is the only country that I've visited now twice during my time in Congress. I feel very committed to this, especially after what we've seen just over the last few hours. This is a scary moment. And I try to approach this with a lot of humility. I'm not going to say I have all the answers about what comes next, but I hope you see in my experience. But also, I'll just share this one last bit. I am a son of South Korean immigrants. My parents were born at the end of the Korean War. I have the entirety of my family still back in Korea, and they live just a few kilometers from one of the deadliest and dangerous borders with North Korea, one of the deadliest borders in the world. And there's a dictator with his hand above a button that could very well send nuclear weapons to annihilate my family and our way of life in Korea. So while I don't have a perfect understanding of what it means to be Jewish, about the fullness of the anxiety and concerns that many of you feel, I just want to share in my own way. I understand and live with that fear in a different capacity. And I bring that to bear to the work that I try to do each and every day. So I look forward to the conversation ahead. Thank you for giving me a chance to be able to say a few words. Thank you so much. And I look forward to getting to know all of you much better, hopefully sometime to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Kim. Really appreciate that. We're going to begin with the Middle East. As issues surrounding Israel's safety and security are uppermost in the minds of many American Jews, Senator Menendez was considered one of the strongest supporters of Israel in the U.S. Senate and viewed Israel as a friend and key ally. Do you share that view? And if so, how should the U.S. be supporting Israel in what many view as an existential war against Hamas and Hezbollah?
I do share this view that it is such a critical strategic ally and partner. There's such a deep connection between the United States and Israel. As mentioned, I've certainly prioritized it as someone who has worked in the Middle East, worked in diplomacy and national security over the course of my career, visited Israel twice as a member of Congress, and feel committed, again, to reiterate Israel's right to be able to defend itself, especially when you see such hostilities right there at their doorstep. And what we saw just a year ago, the horrific actions and terror that happened on October 7th. As someone who's worked in counterterrorism, my career, that was some of the most brutal and repulsive things that I've ever seen in my lifetime. So yes, I feel very strongly about this and want to make sure that we're continuing to press on that, in particular about prioritizing the hostages. I've had a chance to be able to talk to, a number of the families of the hostages held. And I absolutely, my heart breaks to hear their stories and their anxiety and fears about their loved ones. I cannot imagine how hard it has been over the last year. That has to be something that we prioritize going forward, and that's something that I will always prioritize. And I made a promise to those families. So yes, I feel strongly about this, and I feel that this is something that we can all commit to, in terms of making sure that Israel is safe, is defended, and that we try to find a durable peace going forward that hopefully won't just see these cycles of violence that we have seen, and there can be that broader sense of security that has been so elusive over decades that I hope to finally be able to settle in.
Thank you, Congressman. My name is Seth Schulman. In April of this year, you called for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas without having to secure a return of all the hostages, including American hostages. So what I want to ask you, is this still your position? Do you believe that there should be a permanent ceasefire without the unconditional release of all hostages, including the 7 American hostages?
Yeah, no, thanks for raising that, Seth. I want to clarify what I called for was a bilateral agreement that focused on a hostage deal, that there can be no ceasefire, there can be no end to this as long as those hostages are still held by Hamas. So I'm grateful that you gave me a chance to be able to clarify that, because it's so important. As I said, that has to remain our top priority. And I can see no fundamental way in which, after the brutality of October 7th, that we could see, anything that would be able to bring this to violence to an end without the release of the hostages. That is so fundamental. And again, a promise that I made to those families. I do think that, as we are approaching a year out, that we have to remain focused and steadfast on that priority, as it is something that I know is on the minds of everybody. And it's become such a defining point about just security, as well as the insistence that this can never happen again. We cannot allow this to happen again. But when we see Hamas literally dedicating itself to the destruction of Israel, that certainly is a deep and fundamental worry. So yes, I very much want to make sure that any agreement is one that can be agreed to in a bilateral way with the release of hostages. And I say that as someone who's worked in diplomacy, been at the negotiating table. I've been in discussions about previous, ceasefire, end of cessation of hostilities for other parts of the Middle East. I know it's complicated and challenging. It's not something you can wave a magic wand and try to fix. It takes real concerted effort to be able to push through and be able to solidify that. So that's what I wanted to make sure people understand about what it is that I've been working towards, pushing towards, and trying to achieve in terms of the release of all the hostages.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
Thank you.
Speaking of Hamas, are you in favor of a Palestinian state if Hamas is going to be part of that governing body?
Yeah, this is a good question here, because we've certainly had a long-standing policy in the United States under both parties, Democrats and Republicans, of a two-state solution. And so the question is, well, why is it that we are committed to a two-state solution as a nation? And it's because that we seek not just that it's two states, but that perhaps is hopefully the best way that we can envision a durable peace, which is something I mentioned earlier, something that can be something that can withstand just the cycles of violence that we've seen so much of recent. So that is the fundamental goal. The goal is about that durable peace and about the sense of how to be able to move forward. But you do not have that capacity for a two-state solution if both of the sides are not agreeing to that. And in particular, when you have Hamas, again, as a stated goal of their fundamental organization, the destruction of Israel, that poses that existential threat, and you cannot have that sense of a durable peace for as long as that organization continues to be able to lead. So no, I don't see how a two-state solution, and which will be something that is agreed upon by all bodies, would be able to function as long as Hamas is in leadership and continuing to espouse that belief that Israel does not exist. as I said earlier, is so fundamental that we recognize Israel's right to defend itself and exist. It shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that hard for us to be able to just recognize that globally, but unfortunately it is, which is why any type of agreement would need to codify that and be able to make sure that that durable peace is something that can be achieved.
Thank you, Congressman. As we know, Iran's leadership is behind the current war and bloodshed in the Middle East. Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, Yemen, and now Iran is on the precipice of weaponizing a nuclear weapon. Was it a mistake for the Biden administration to release sanctions, which essentially infused Iranian leaders with the cash to fund these proxy wars? What would you do differently?
Yeah, well, in Congress, we've been moving and pushing forward in a different direction. We've pushed forward on the Iranian Sanctions Enforcement Act in a bipartisan way, in a bicameral way, trying to make sure that we're pushing in a very aggressive way. And we've seen how that's been, able to be addressed, not just when it comes to Iran, but also when it comes to Russia and other actors that are trying to undermine our international order, trying to undermine the international peace that's out there. And what we recognize right now is just, again, I told you I worked for years on countering the Quds Force, countering Qasem Soleimani and others. We've seen how they've been able to utilize the resources of their government to then fund the terror all over the Middle East that have taken the lives of a lot of Americans. I mean, I worked in Iraq. I remember, just the devastation of the IEDs that were, funding and paid for and trained by Iran to these Shia militia groups to go after American service members. So, this is not something that we have been a bystander to. We've been the target of this. And that's something that we have to recognize that, they are an enemy and they have attacked us and killed many Americans as well as Israelis. So, this is something we want to make sure that we are strong on and be able to engage. Now, the other component of this, which is important, is that we've learned, especially through what happened in Ukraine, that, sorry, my kid, can you give me a little time, buddy?
But I need, wait, do we
Sorry
have any
about
glue?
that. No, we don't have glue, okay? I'll get you the glue after I
what about-
finish. Can I
Is there
finish
any
this, please?
double-sided tape?
I'll get you the double-sided tape. Sorry. I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, 2 little boys that have figured out how to pick the lock to my door. So I've learned that the hard way. But look, what I'll just say at this point is that it's when we learn from Ukraine and the situation there, it's so vitally important that you have an international coalition as wide as humanly possible to be able to enforce these sanctions to. If you don't, you see too many situations in which countries like Iran, like Russia, are able to evade them and basically nullify a lot of the effect. And so, it's important that we build these as strong as possible, but as wide as possible in terms of that coalition.
Thank you.
Good evening, Congressman Kim. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
I can hear you just fine.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay. And you mentioned earlier tonight when you made your introduction that you have, we thank you. You stood up for anti-Semitism, countering anti-Semitism. And I want to now turn to the rise of hate in our country. You mentioned it earlier. Anti-Semitism and hate crimes against Jews were at an all-time high this last year. Our colleges and universities, including Rutgers, have seen angry demonstrations expressing support for Hamas and contempt for the United States. Jewish students on campus have described harrowing situations of bullying and intimidation. Should the federal government deny federal dollars to universities that violate Title VI anti-discrimination laws and fail to properly support Jewish students?
Yeah, thanks for raising, as you said, just the sheer level of anti-Semitism is out of control and so scary. And there's very clearly a line that gets crossed that just takes this away from just, free speech into just that sense of hate. I mean, I remember being here at the Capitol and seeing, sprayed, on Union Station, Hamas is coming. And we certainly seen, the horrific things that, have been said, across this country in different ways. And that's unacceptable. And that needs to be made very, very clear. As you saw, I'm a father of two little boys. Two little boys that, unfortunately in their short, life so far have experienced hate in their own ways. Just the level of antagonism and xenophobia about China is now spreading into hate. And my kids have unfortunately been subjected to that. And I wouldn't want that for anybody. And these hate, these discrimination and xenophobia, they take and manifest in different ways, but they have similar roots. And I'm so grateful for so many of the Jewish community in New Jersey standing up against hate during the COVID crisis that was facing the Asian American community. And it's important that we stand together in all these different ways. When it comes to colleges and universities in particular, well, certainly what we need to make sure we're pushing forward on, as I said, the Countering Anti-Semitism Act, something that lays out further definitions of anti-Semitism, be able to provide funding for the nonprofit security grant program, make sure that we have Holocaust studies and other things like that that are trying to push forward, have a national coordinator when it comes to addressing anti-Semitism. Those are steps. But what we also need to do is make sure that, we're funding, the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights. Something that I'll be honest with you, we've seen Speaker Johnson propose a 20 to 25% cut to that office that would impede their ability to actually do the investigation, as we've seen thousands and thousands of cases increasing recently, at college campuses. So let's, agree in a bipartisan way to be able to fund that office. Let's try to make sure that, they're able to investigate and be able to engage. Certainly the Department of Education has already given notice to colleges and universities that if there are violations of Title VI, regardless of what is the category in which it's being that is being violated, that could threaten their funding and federal funding, and that is why Title VI exists. And so if we see that type of violation at a deep and fundamental level without a capacity or interest in fixing it, yes, that federal support can be withheld and should be withheld in appropriate ways. We want to make sure that's not being abused. We want to make sure that there are right checks and balances in terms of how that's being adjudicated, which again is why we're going to have to increase that funding, not just prevent the cuts, but increase the funding to the Office of Civil Rights, and be able to have certainly strong oversight from Congress to ensure its proper utilization. So that's something I feel strongly about.
Congressman, an important ideal in the Jewish community is tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. Here at Jewish Federation, we work with a number of different organizations to provide for the vulnerable individuals, senior citizens, Holocaust survivors, people with disabilities, and other overlooked groups. How will you fight for these struggling communities and embody this idea of tikkun olam if elected to Congress?
Yeah, I think it is such a beautiful sentiment, and one that in its simplicity has great depth. It's something that reminds me of how my parents raised me. My parents had this line when I was growing up. They said, service isn't just a job, it's a way of life. That it's about our fundamental relationships to the people around us, that we have a responsibility, we have a connection. And I worry that it feels like we're losing touch with some of this sentiment in our society. It feels like we're losing touch with this idea that we're part of something bigger than us, that we're part of something that we need to care for, that we're not just looking at for ourselves. And I've often referred to myself in this job as a public servant, but also as a caretaker that is dedicated to a fundamental question, which is how do we heal this country? Again, I think about my two boys, 7 and 9. I'll be honest with you, I'm worried about what kind of America they're growing up in. When we see all the crisis and the chaos out there, and that is what fundamentally drives me. And it really comes down to that sense of service, that sense of plurality that we need to make sure that we're investing in. I am very impressed with what the Federation, with the different work that you do, different engagements to help different vulnerable populations, to support seniors, to support others in such a deep way. And you know it's not charity because it is instead this sense of investment and sense of responsibility. I've been trying to invest in deeper, civics education as a country. I've been putting forward legislation to build national service programs. I mean, look, I'm a Democrat that represents a district Trump won twice. I've been at the front lines of so much of this question about divisions in our politics. But when I got my start, I was a career public servant. I worked under both Republicans and Democrats, the Bush administration, the Obama administration. When I was out in Afghanistan, no one there asks you if you're a Democrat or Republican. You're just an American just trying to get a mission done. So I very much believe deeply in that sentiment, Tikkun Olam, and just this sense of healing, the sense of seeking that ability to be able to fix. And that is what drives me. I've been a public servant my entire life, and I hope to be able to serve this country for the rest of my life for that fundamental ability of just getting things done for the community, whether that's the constituent service work that my office has done, or just the deep ways in which I'm trying to cultivate a new era of public service in America, because I do believe that that is the fundamental way in which we try to heal this country. So thank you for raising that. That's a very important concept, and one that I think we could all benefit from a lot more.
Thank you, Congressman Kim. We appreciate that. And at this time, we'd like to ask the audience if they have a question they'd like to ask Congressman Kim to please put it in the chat box now. And at this time, we're going to get into our last question. Congressman Kim, politics in this country have become fiercely partisan and bitterly divisive. How do you propose to restore faith in our political system? Do you have any example you can point to of reaching across the aisle to tackle our nation's problems?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect question to build off of from the last one of just, the sense of, how do you heal and fix? And then now the sense of, well, what does it mean to actually govern? And that's something that I think, again, we're losing touch with, certainly in Congress. I fundamentally come from a place of thinking about how to be able to get things done, how to be able to think of governance, not just in terms of the politics and the partisanship. And I'll just share one thing here. I mean, as I mentioned, I'm a Democrat that won a district Trump won twice. In 2020, I was one of only 7 Democrats in the nation to win a district Trump won that year. And through that process of engaging, I remember there's one incident that really stands out to me. I was doing a town hall. I've now done 80 town halls in my time in Congress. And I think that's a fundamental approach of going out there and engaging people. And this one town hall I did was in a deep Republican town in Ocean County, in Berkeley Township, a town that I lost handily in the election. But I showed up nonetheless, and several hundred people were there. I took their questions, and I stood before them and I said, whether you voted for me or not, you're my boss. And my job is to serve you and your family to the best of my ability. And I knew that we were going to have differences of opinions. And we had some tough questions that day. After the town hall, there was a long line of people waiting to talk to me one-on-one. And there was an older gentleman in the back. He waited 45 minutes to be able to come up to have a chance to be able to talk with me. And he came up to me and he started by saying, I just wanted you to know I didn't vote for you. Then he proceeded and said, I was very hesitant to come to this town hall. But then he stuck out his hand and said, but I'm glad I did, shook my hand and walked off. It was one of the most profound moments in my time in politics. And what I take away from that is this sense that I don't necessarily think I earned that man's vote just for showing up and taking some tough questions, but I do think I earned his respect. And I think that sense of respect is what we are so much lacking right now. Like, we live in the time of the greatest amount of distrust in government in modern American history. And I think we should be able to, in a bipartisan way, agree upon changes to address corruption, to address, brokenness in our politics. But we also need to be able to ensure that sense of respect. The very first piece of legislation I introduced as a member of Congress was with a Republican colleague from across the river from me, Brian Fitzpatrick, talking about addressing our healthcare. I joined up on the Armed Services Committee, trying to push forward on mental health support for our service members, trying to address and address veteran suicide. And in just a couple weeks, we're going to have a brand new VA health clinic for our veterans in Ocean County that's going to open in Toms River that I pushed so hard for, and I'm proud to be able to deliver that. Those are the types of just tangible things that we can get done. Is it going to solve all our problems? Of course not. But it gives us that sense of muscle memory of just what it means to work together. And I think that that's something that means a lot to me as I come at this from a nonpartisan sense. As I told you from my work in national security before, we always said the last place that partisan politics belongs is in national security. So yes, I continue to try to push for an agenda that is bipartisan, try to address this issue of distrust and a lack of respect in our politics. And I hope to be somebody that can promote that going forward. And we've seen my ability to be able to engage in that, through the fact that I was continuously reelected in a divided district. And I hope that it gives people a sense of how it is that I operate.
Appreciate it, Congressman.
Thank you.
Now, at this time, we're going to take some questions from the audience. So first question I have for you, Congressman. You voted against the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act earlier this year. You were one of only 2 New Jersey Congress people to vote against it. Can you please explain why?
Yeah, I'm really glad that this came up because I wanted to clarify this. As I mentioned earlier, anti-Semitism is something that I feel very strongly that we stand up together to fight against. And I've demonstrated that by the work that I did in Ocean County, my commitment to the Countering Anti-Semitism Act. What we need to make sure that we do when we address anti-Semitism is that we need to make sure that we are doing this in as unified a way as possible. And the thing that I can't stand the most is when I feel like the issue of anti-Semitism is becoming politicized, when it's becoming weaponized for elections and other purposes. And I felt frustrated earlier this year when I felt like some of that was happening, because what we had before us was an opportunity to really address anti-Semitism, as we were talking about, and as you know all better than I do. This is perhaps the most scary moment in a lifetime when it comes to anti-Semitism. And what we need are not words, but real actions. And so I felt that if we were going to try to meet the moment, we need to do something big. We need to do something that is really going to address this at a fundamental level. The Countering Anti-Semitism Act is something that provides significant more money for the nonprofit security grant program. Overwhelming number one issue that I hear from so many Jewish American leaders in New Jersey. I went to a synagogue up in Hoboken that was defaced, and talking about the challenges that they were facing in terms of upgrading their facilities. We need a major investment in that. We want to have that national coordinator for anti-Semitism that sits at the White House that can engage in this. Moving forward with a Jewish Heritage Month, with a Holocaust studies, with so many other provisions that are real, and there's real money behind that. Instead, leadership in Congress and the House of Representatives chose not to go with that piece of legislation, but instead to go with a piece of legislation that has no money attached to it, no resources attached to it. And at that same exact time, Speaker Johnson, who would put forward the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, was also pushing a budget forward that would gut the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education by 20%. So I did not feel that he was properly thinking about this in terms of what is best at this moment to address it when he's trying to push forward on something, chose, in my opinion, the wrong bill, and now has set back the Countering Anti-Semitism Act by months, if not longer. So I just wanted to share. I feel very strongly about making sure that we do not politicize the issues of anti-Semitism on Capitol Hill. Unfortunately, as you all know, it does happen. And I want to make sure that we're choosing the best possible policy to be able to address this. I understand there may be many of you that still disagree with that action, but I hope you understand that and recognize it's not for a lack of commitment to addressing anti-Semitism, but in fact, it's for me about choosing the strongest possible way forward rather than just words and gestures. This moment is so scary that it demands real action, real money, real resources to be able to address it. Thank you.
Second question from our audience, Congressman. Caring for our parents is a Jewish imperative. How will you see that Social Security will be there for them, and how will you ensure that nursing homes are adequately staffed?
Yeah. Yeah, this is thank you for raising this. In my culture and Korean culture, looking after our elders is incredibly important. And I'll just share with you something personal. Earlier this summer, my father had a really bad fall. My father is someone who already was a survivor of polio since he was a baby, struggled to walk for much of his life. And when he broke his femur in this accident, um, it appears that he may never be able to fully walk again in the way that he had before. And he was living on his own in a place with stairs, not able to be able to go back there. And as I was trying to find a place for him to be able to get the care that he needs, it was exceedingly expensive. And in New Jersey in particular, I mean, it was getting to the point where, we were basically faced with the options of, paying at least $10,000 a month, or basically bankrupting him until he's eligible for Medicaid. And that's just not right. We deserve to be able to give our seniors, our elders, our moms, our dads, our grandparents, to have the kind of care that they need at a deep and fundamental way. So yes, I mean, this is the reason why I've been so strong in terms of my commitment on addressing Medicare. I've been trying to expand Medicare so it has vision, hearing, dental coverage, to be able to have greater care for long-term care and other types of home assistance, that we lower prescription drug costs, which is something that I've worked hard to be able to do. And with Social Security, we have to fundamentally secure that going forward so that it is available for everybody that is participating in this. It's been our number one tool to be able to address poverty among seniors and be able to cut that dramatically over the years. So yes, I support legislation, Social Security 2100, that is putting Social Security on a path to be able to be there for future generations, and to be able to make sure that we're promoting this in a way that tries to give our seniors the life of dignity and decency that they deserve. They're not asking for the moon. They're just asking to be able to live a good life after, a long life of working hard, being able to contribute to this country and looking after their families. So I'm glad you asked that, and it's something I feel very strongly about, and I think it will be a very much a top priority of mine in the United States Senate if elected.
Thank you. And Congressman, here's our last question in 2 minutes for your response, please. It's been a year that Hamas has held our hostages as far as we can see. There has been no progress to get their release. Do you think a change of administration would lead to a faster release like President Reagan did with the Iranian hostages? What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's quite the same comparableness. One of my former bosses at the State Department was one of the diplomats that was held hostage by the Iranians, and we've talked about that at length. I think the difference there was that in that circumstance, all of those hostages were Americans. In this situation, we've been looking at different avenues, including there's been effort where we talked with a number of families of the hostages if there was, a separate deal that the United States could be able to make directly to be able to release at least the American hostages. But I think that the leverage point was not enough in terms of what it is that can be offered. What we see right now with Hamas is they are so dug in right now, on the fundamental questions facing the Middle East. There hasn't been, I don't think, honestly, that the United States, our resources or our politics are really at the heart of what it is that their calculations are about. So, I do hope that it doesn't have to wait until a new administration to be able to free these hostages. I am still hopeful despite the challenges that we face, and I look at this with sober eyes as someone who's worked in this space, and have seen how difficult it is. But we have to continue at it, and it isn't just about the United States, and frankly, it isn't just about Israel. It's about building that national or that international coalition and voice, saying, look, whatever your differences are, and they're deep, but you cannot bring civilians, you cannot bring hostages into the mix and use them as leverage in that kind of capacity. It is just so terrible and horrible that like I said, we're a week out from the anniversary of October 7th, and I can just simply there are limits to what my imagination can bring in terms of just what those families are going through. But look, for the rest of us, and I'll end here. There's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of challenges that we face. I hope that you've gotten a better sense of who I am and my experience I bring to the table, and what I'm trying to do. Like I said, I come to this with a lot of humility. I don't have all the answers, but I look forward to getting to know you and different communities across New Jersey. And I promise you that regardless of what happens on November 5th, I hope to be somebody that is present, someone that can work with you, someone that can talk with you going forward for hopefully years to come, to be able to address these issues in a deep way. I'll always be accessible, always be somebody that can be able to engage as I have in the past, in my experiences and my work. So thank you, David. Thank you to the Federation for giving me this opportunity to say a few words.
Congressman, we want to thank you for joining us tonight and speaking with our community. Really appreciate it. And the ways you have stood with our community to denounce the rise of anti-Semitism. Should you be elected to the U.S. Senate, we hope you'll consider taking a trip to Israel early in your first term to get a firm understanding of the situation on the ground and the serious existential threats facing Israel in the aftermath of October 7th. On behalf of all 5 Jewish federations, we wish you the best of luck heading into Election Day. We're now going to take a 5-minute break and come back with Curtis Bashaw, the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate. Thank you.
Let's begin.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Schwartz, JCRC Chair of the Jewish Federation of West Central New Jersey. It's my pleasure to introduce Curtis Bashaw, the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate. Curtis is a lifelong New Jersey resident who grew up in Camden County. He's the founder and managing partner of Cape Resorts, a hotel company focusing on the restoration and operation of classic American resort properties in New Jersey and New York. He's a self-described preservationist, a hotel entrepreneur, and job creator, and I'm sure will tell us why he's decided to pivot from the hotel industry to politics and run for U.S. Senate. Before we give you the floor, Curtis, a few words about us. We represent the government affairs divisions of 5 Jewish federations across the state of New Jersey. The Jewish community of New Jersey is the 4th largest in the country, with well over 600,000 residents. We're a diverse people in terms of our political views and Jewish religious affiliation, yet we are all inspired by the same Jewish values. We care deeply about Israel, the defensive war it's fighting against terrorist groups committed to its destruction, the fate of our hostages, the rise of anti-Semitism, and the Jewish imperative to care for the communities most vulnerable. We now invite you to give your opening remarks for 5 minutes, after which the 3 of us from different Jewish federations will follow up with a series of questions. We respectfully ask that you keep your answers to no more than 2 minutes. As we did during the conversation with Congressman Kim, we invite members of the audience to put questions into the chat, which we'll get to in about 20 minutes. Curtis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege to be here. Before I do my remarks, I just want to comment about today. I think it's a sad day that Iran has attacked Israel. It's on the cusp of a new year, in a year that saw the terrible attacks just about a year ago. And so I feel the concern that everyone has for people in Israel, and just want to acknowledge that. I got involved in the United States Senate race as a political outsider and a businessman. I grew up in Camden County, that's correct, Cherry Hill. I went to Cherry Hill schools through the 9th grade, worked summer jobs in Ocean City and then Cape May in hospitality, carrying bags, working at a front desk of a hotel. I went back to Cape May after college because I loved hospitality, and I started a business by renovating the Virginia Hotel. We grew that business from 30 employees over 35 years by renovating Congress Hall, the Beach Shack, the Sandpiper, creating Beach Plum Farm, and we now employ 1,100 people. Our team has grown an economy together that supports 800 families. And so being in a business where I make a payroll every 2 weeks, I live by a budget every year. We built this brick by brick. I've honed my skills building a business, and I understand the front lines of the economy and the challenges of small businesses. I was honored to be appointed as a Republican by a Democratic governor in 2004 because of the success of the Congress Hall renovation as an economic development project and a preservation project, to go run the Casino Reinvestment Development Authority in Atlantic City, a very large state authority. And I worked with Democrats, Republicans, independents. I worked with all the state agencies, the leaders of those agencies, and in the different communities. And so I love bringing people together to get things done. I'm a builder, I'm a practical person. And then after which, I was also appointed to the Stockton College Board. For 12 years, I served on that board. We took that school from 2,000 day students to an 8,000 strong university that's residential. And the work that Stockton did, Holocaust Resource Center, supporting South Jersey, was a great privilege of service that I was able to give to our community. So when this Senate race came up, it felt to me like there was a bit too much corruption, too many political insiders in our politics. The governor's wife thought that she should have the Senate seat. I thought, you know, it's time for change. New Jersey's 49th out of the 50 states and what we get back from the federal government, yet we're the 3rd or 4th largest contributor to the state. I don't like being second to last. I think we can do better than that. Personally, I grew up in a very conservative religious family. My grandfather was a minister in Collingswood, New Jersey, who was on the right side of things politically and spiritually with his faith. I learned at an early age the values, though, of our core freedoms, that he wanted to persuade people, but he didn't want to take away liberties. And those great freedoms we enjoy of speech, conscience, worship, assembly, and enterprise come with a price that they need to be shared equally with our neighbors with whom we might not agree. As I grew up and realized that I was a gay person, I had to come to terms that there were people in the world in which I grew up that didn't think that I was living in the right way. I had to, I went to New York, it was early AIDS epidemic, and there again, I got involved with groups that were pursuing gay rights. In both instances, I had an insight at a young age that people didn't understand each other, and that there was no corner of the market on intolerance in the extremes. I realized that people that I grew up with thought every gay person was a certain way. The flip side was that people who were activists in the gay rights movement thought that every Christian person was a hateful person. That's not true either. So I've always been a consensus builder and wanted to make sure that we are listening to each other and giving each other the space to have our points of view. You know, I'm a Republican, and I'll stand with my party when I agree with it. But when I don't agree with it, I'll stand up to it. I'm a married gay man who's pro-choice. Not every Republican agrees with me, but I do believe that we can't spend our way to prosperity. We can't regulate our way to innovation and success. And I think that we need fiscal discipline in Washington so that we can grow our economy and do better for New Jersey. I got involved in this race because I believe we need to let the acrimony out of our politics and roll up our sleeves and do better for our state. And so I'm a moderate person running in a great tradition of New Jersey senators that are moderate. We are a can-do state. We're a diverse state, and we can do better for New Jersey. So I'm looking forward to serving in the United States Senate. When I was just 18 years old, I went with my grandfather, the preacher, for a 3-week trip to Israel. We were following the steps of Abraham. And I remember very vividly being in Damascus when we were awakened at 3 a.m. because they were going to close the Allenby Bridge, and racing to get across into Israel before that bridge was closed. The tensions then were palpable. And I learned at an early age that, you know, Israel's right to exist, and it's the way Israel protects itself and defends itself and is our ally, is the only true democracy in the Middle East, was part of the way I was raised. And so these last weeks and the year that we've been through have been concerning to me. I am honored to be part of this Senate race and to work to do better for New Jersey. And I look forward to serving and answering your questions.
Curtis, thank you. I'm Leslie Dannon Rosenthal, and I'm coming from the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West. First question.
Thanks, Leslie. Yes.
So we're going to begin tonight with the Middle East, where all our hearts are. And as issues surrounding Israel's safety and security are clearly uppermost in the minds of many American Jews. You talked about the tradition of New Jersey senators. New Jersey Senator Menendez was considered one of the strongest supporters of Israel in the U.S. Senate and viewed Israel as a friend and key ally. Do you share that view? And if so, as you've said, how should the U.S. be supporting Israel in what many view as an existential war against Hamas and Hezbollah?
I think Senator Menendez has been a strong ally for Israel in the tradition of Frank Lautenberg. I think that my opponent is soft on Israel, voting against H.R. 6090, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, not going to the well of Congress to vote yes for that act that was going to really stand up for the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. I don't know why that happened, but I am a strong ally of Israel. I believe that Israel has the right to defend itself. and needs the United States support as our ally. The United States doesn't negotiate with terrorists. I don't know why we're expecting Israel to. The calls for ceasefires by my opponent and so many people are part of a foreign policy that is not clear. Wars need to be won. Israel needs to be allowed not just to defend itself, but now to win the war because of the brutal attacks that they have been subject to. I don't understand. Menendez certainly wouldn't have supported getting rid of the sanctions on Iran. I don't know why we would release those funds and allow Iran, who was a known supporter of Hezbollah and Hamas, to have all those dollars back to put this thing forward. I think we need peace through strength, and we need to let Israel defend itself. We can't micromanage a war. We need to win a war.
Good evening. My name is Ed Dauber. I'm representing the Northern New Jersey Federation, and you've already referred to two of the things that I wanted to ask you about. One is the attack last week by Israel on the command headquarters of Hezbollah, killing their leader Hassan Nasrallah, and today Iran's attack with some 180 missiles on Israel. What positions with regard to those particular events and the broader issue, in which you've somewhat addressed already, would you take in light of those most recent developments?
Well, I just think that Iran has clearly been waging war against Israel for a long, long time. And today they just admitted it, because Israel once again showed the world the courage it has to defend itself and to go into the fire to protect the homeland. I mean, what they've done has just demonstrated again the prowess and the integrity of the Israeli defense systems to make sure they send a signal of strength. We need to be unequivocal in our support of Israel. They are fighting the democracy on the front lines for America. The rise in anti-Semitism has to be confronted. It's a bellwether for so many other intolerances and has been throughout history. So I think that Israel is standing up. I think the world's taken notice. I think Iran has come out of the closet and is just admitting that it's behind all this. And there's an opportunity here to not only set the record straight, but to really win this war. Iran knows it can't win, and we need to be supportive of Israel in this moment and help them with our support and our military contributions that we're making so that they can have victory.
Thank you. As you know, over the years, there have been various proposals for a two-state solution. And are you in favor of a Palestinian state if Hamas is going to be part of the governing body of that state?
Absolutely not. There is no moral equivalence between Hamas and the state of Israel. Hamas took tons of our Western money and built tunnels under their own citizens to hide underneath of them. It is absolutely not, in my mind, negotiable. We don't negotiate with terrorists. Israel shouldn't be forced to negotiate with terrorists. There's no moral equivalence here. And I say no to that answer, to that question, excuse me.
Yeah, Curtis, the next question we have, you generally answered, but I'll kind of reflect back on it as an opportunity for you to expand upon that. As we know, obviously, Iran's leadership is behind most of, if not all of the weaponization of terrorism in the Middle East, and certainly as they're on the precipice of getting a nuclear weapon. Obviously, the Biden administration, as you mentioned, opted to release sanctions, which provided cash to fund some of these proxy wars. What would you have done differently moving forward?
Look, these things aren't academic. They are real life things. We can't talk about them diplomacy is very important, but this division, Iran's quest to annihilate Israel is something that has just been on the table. They've been consistent about it. And so I would never have voted to release, I'm not sure it would have come before the Senate in that instance, to release those sanctions. They need, and the nuclear weapon development that we've done, I think we've been going down a slippery slope that is making the world more dangerous.
So continuing to talk about anti-Semitism, let's talk about the rise of anti-Semitism and the rise of hate in general in our country. Anti-Semitism and hate crimes against Jews were at an all-time high this last year. Our colleges and universities, including Rutgers, have seen angry demonstrations expressing support for Hamas and contempt for U.S. Jewish students have experienced horrific situations of bullying and intimidation. Should the federal government deny federal dollars to universities that violate Title VI and anti-discrimination laws and fail to properly support Jewish students? And how would you make sure that Jewish students are supported?
Well, first of all, I say, yes, we should deny funding. I went to Rutgers in that encampment. I stood there. I looked at the signs on those tents. I saw them. I did a video. It was one of my first in the campaign, actually. I was a brand new candidate. But let me say this. If those words and signs had been targeted against a gay group or against a group of a minority of people of color, that Merrick Garland would have had the Justice Department down there in a nanosecond doing an investigation. In my view, there's been a double standard on this. And why we hide in these universities behind free speech on one hand with one group, but not on another, is a head scratcher for me. This is why I don't understand why Andy Kim stood with the squad instead of New Jersey and voted against HR 6090 that wanted to make the definition of anti-Semitism clear, the IHRA definition. I don't understand that. Frank Lautenberg would be rolling over in his grave. I mean, we've always been strong supporters of Israel as a state. And I stand there, anti-Semitism, hatred towards gays. Look, everyone experiences antipathy at different times, but we cannot allow that to be codified against a group of people, whether they're Jewish students, whether they're gay students, whether they're minorities. We have to be consistent and clear and strong, and the universities need to be a place where free expression flourishes. We can have uncomfortable conversations, but we can't hide behind speech and use that as an intimidation factor to keep people from going to schools or having them not feel safe and secure on their campuses.
Oh, you're on mute, Leslie.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Where do you stand on reproductive rights, a woman's right to choose an abortion, as well as other personal decisions about her reproductive health and the overturning of Roe versus Wade?
I am absolutely a pro-choice American. I believe in freedom. I do not think government should be in our homes telling us who we can marry, who we live with, what decisions we make about our health and about reproductive health for women. I just believe that freedom to choose is a fundamental thing. I would support a bill in Congress that would codify the rights of a woman to have an abortion. I believe that that's a right that they should have. The Supreme Court sent it back to the states. There's a whole constitutional conversation going on about separation of powers, et cetera, et cetera. If the right place to do this is in the legislative branch, let's do it. I would never vote for an abortion ban. My opponents and the Democratic Party keeps trying to tell me that I'm not pro-choice when I am. I don't know what to do about that. but I just say, please don't put me in a box. It's inconvenient in this election cycle to keep trying to infer that I'm not pro-choice, but I am a pro-choice person, and that's where I stand. And I would never do anything to take away or vote. I would vote for codifying those rights federally to protect women in every single state.
Thanks, Curtis. An important ideal in the Jewish community is tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. Here at the Jewish Federation, we work with a number of different organizations to provide for vulnerable individuals, senior citizens, Holocaust survivors, people with disabilities, and other overlooked and marginalized groups. How will you fight for these struggling communities in representation of this idea of tikkun olam if elected to Congress?
Listen, I was raised in a Christian, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, in the Protestant side of things. And we knew that it was our obligation as human beings, as citizens, to take care of the least among us. We are social creatures as humans. We live in families. We have towns, we have counties, we have states, and we have a country. We need to make sure our company is very civically engaged. We raise money for food closets. We are out there encouraging our team members to all be part of our community. We participate with nonprofits. So I support that mission. Philanthropy and charities is a great American tradition, and we need to support that not just through private charities, but through the social groups in which we live. And there's levels where we need to make sure that we are caring for the least among us. They're our brothers and sisters, and we need to, I totally support those efforts and agree in the spirit of that ideal.
Thank you. Last question, and a chance for you to set the record straight. During this campaign so far, has there been any information that's come out about you, either by your opponent or from any other source, that you would like to have the opportunity to clarify here tonight?
Look, politics are politics, and people are going to say things about each other, and that's sort of what you sign up for when you get into this. You know, one thing I guess that's important for me to just keep clarifying is that I am a moderate. I'm someone who is pro-choice. I'm a married gay man. I believe that we need to work in a bipartisan way. I was put into by a Democratic governor to run a very significant state agency as a Republican. I love to bring people together to get things done. I'm a sleeves rolled up guy. You know, I made beds for a living. We cooked meals. We grew our business. And I think there needs to be a can-do spirit that I like to say my campaign is driving up the center lane of the New Jersey Turnpike. And I believe that my opponent, who has voted 100% of the time with his party, he's a progressive caucus member and part of the squad. I think that he is more to the extreme than I am in this race. I am a person that wants to bring us together and accomplish things. And I don't want people, because I happen to be a Republican in this cycle, people of goodwill disagree about the top of the ticket. I'm not the top of the ticket. I'm Curtis Bashaw, running for United States Senate to do the best job I can to do better for our state. I'm running against Andy Kim. That's the race I'm in. I know that there's going to be plenty of people that vote for Kamala Harris that vote for me, because they know that I'm the common sense, practical guy that can get things done for our state. And we're 49th out of 50 states in what we get back from the federal government. We can do better. So that's the thing that I would leave with you. I don't have to do this job. I'm not a career politician. I'm not a political insider. I'm doing this because to me, it's a mission and it's a form of service. I believe in service. I believe in citizenship. Our country is of the people, by the people, for the people. We don't need to just have lawyers, career politicians, and career administrators on one side and business people on the other side. I think we need to bring those two groups together to be more productive. So I'm in this because I know we can win. I know the voters are there, and I want to be a moderate voice that gets things done for our state, that helps let the air out of our politics in a state that is can-do and independent.
Curtis, thank you so much. We have some questions from the audience for you, and really looking forward to your answers. If elected to the Senate, would you vote to continue support for Ukraine?
I would. I believe we need to defend our allies. I don't think it's appropriate to tell Putin, if you don't come in too far, it's okay. Like, I just think that I would much rather send our treasure to a people who are wanting to defend their freedom than wait for an incursion and have to send our young men and women into harm's way. Look at what happened in the Second World War. We equivocated. Chamberlain, Rose, like, we didn't jump in there. And what did we have? We had a horrible war where 2 million of our young men died and where we had a Holocaust. I just think that we need to support allies in times of peril that are our friends and that stand with democracy.
Thank you. Next question. People in the audience are interested to hear your thoughts on the exclusion of Jewish groups from gay pride parades and from groups like Queers for Palestine.
I can identify with you guys on this. It makes no sense. The gay organization in New Jersey endorsed my opponent because I wouldn't sign up for one teeny little detail on a law that they wanted to have a law passed that would keep secrets from parents about their minor kids. I believe that that's the sanctity of the home too. So we're so partisanized that we're mixed up. I mean, I don't understand gays for Palestine. If I moved to Palestine, they could kill me. I mean, I'm not legal. It doesn't make any sense. So this to me is part of this bizarre woke extremism that's just permeated our society that, quite frankly, New Jerseyans are sick of. People don't think it makes sense, which is why another reason I'm involved in this race. We got to just stop this crazy rhetoric and get back to allowing each other to pursue our happiness, live in our domestic tranquility, and grow our economy. There's no better social program than a job. And I'm a job creator. So maybe I rambled a bit to your question, but I feel very strongly that that's absurd.
So, well, here's a straightforward question. Do you believe the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump?
I believe that Joe Biden is the legitimate president of the United States. And I believe that the peaceful transfer of power is one of the most magical, sacred things that we do in America. George Washington set this precedent. Now, I believe that we need to make sure we have election integrity, that we believe in the process. We shouldn't be tearing it down. But I believe Joe Biden was elected president of the United States.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. So as a moderate Republican married gay man, are you supporting Donald Trump?
We all have to make a tough choice this year, in my opinion. And I do not think we can have 4 more years of the same. I do not think that we can have an open border. We need to secure it. I do not think that we can spend our way to prosperity or that we can regulate our way to success. So I believe in peace through strength. So I am making a choice as of, right now. I would vote for Donald Trump if that election was tomorrow. I know people of goodwill are going to disagree with me. I know a lot of people are going to vote for Kamala Harris. I'll say this, there's no perfect candidate. I'm not a perfect candidate, but I believe I'm the best candidate to serve our state in this Senate race. And I know people are going to vote for me that vote for Donald Trump. And I think people are going to vote for me that vote for Kamala Harris.
Thank you. Although you have been very clear that you are pro-choice and pro-Ukraine, How would you handle pressure from your other Republicans in the Senate if you are elected to, quote, toe the line?
Well, first of all, I'm not doing this for a career. I've had a fantastic career. I'm doing this because I think I'm well equipped to do just that. I've said it. When my party's right, I will defend it. When it's not right, I will stand up to it. I think my party's right when you want to cut taxes, when we want to grow the economy, when we want to secure our border, when we want to support law enforcement. I am proud to have all 3 New Jersey police unions endorsing our candidacy. But I am a married gay man and I am pro-choice. And there's plenty of times that I don't agree with Republicans, all Republicans. Plenty of Republicans, I believe, support those issues. So I am not a rubber stamp. This goes back to my opponent. His record, look it up. He's voted 100% of the time with Biden and Harris. He's voted 99% of the time with his leadership. Really? Is that what's best for New Jersey? I can't imagine. I am not a rubber stamp. I've been making decisions my whole life. I've had to say no to things, and I'm not any kind of a pushover, and I can stand up for principle over politics all day long.
Thank you. One last question. Caring for our parents is a Jewish imperative. How will you see that Social Security will be there for them, and how will you ensure that nursing homes are adequately staffed?
I think that caring for the elderly is important for any society. My mother, we've been caring for her. She has dementia. I'm grateful that I have 4 siblings. Navigating the system is really tough, and we have worked it out in a way, and she has loving care. She's in an amazing place that we can all support her. So I appreciate caregivers. I met with the AARP. There's all these laws that are being worked on in a bipartisan way that I support that would help reimburse caregivers that are trying to help people stay in their homes as long as possible. So Social Security and Medicare, they're sacred trusts. They are contracts that we pay into, and we need to make it secure. But we also, at some point as a country, need to be able to have an honest conversation about how to make it solvent. Are we going to raise the cost? Are we going to change the eligibility age for kids that are 15 years old that haven't started paying in yet and that don't have a contract? When are we going to have politicians that will actually have a real conversation to solve these kinds of problems? That's what I want to be. I want to go there to tackle these sorts of problems that people that need their job, that are worried about the next election cycle, don't want to deal with.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure to speak with you this evening.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
We want to thank you for sharing your views with our community. Should you be elected to the U.S. Senate, we hope you will consider taking a trip to Israel early in your first term to get a firm understanding of the situation on the ground and the serious existential threats facing Israel in the aftermath of October 7th. We wish you the
say that I was booked to go to Israel, but the whole Hezbollah thing was flaring up, and the trip that got canceled that we were going on. So I can't wait to go there. I loved my trip there in 1978. I had my 18th birthday on the Sea of Galilee water skiing. As a Christian person, we thought that was kind of cool because, you know, in our book, Jesus walked on the water there. So I had a great time in Israel, and I can't wait to go back because I know it is existential, and I like to see things firsthand.
Thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck in the remaining days of the campaign.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
To everyone who took the time to be here, we thank you for joining this forum and becoming educated voters. We at the Jewish Federations across New Jersey believe that voting is a core American and Jewish value. In our state, there are 3 different ways to vote: by mail, by early voting, which begins October 26th through November 3rd, and on Election Day, Tuesday, November 5th. Good luck again to both candidates, and thank you all for being a part of tonight's program. Wishing you all a Shana Tova, a healthy, happy, peaceful new year for all of us. Good night.